All right. Welcome to the roundtable. We're just doing a brief conversation with some locals that I am good friends with. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves. In case you're not aware, my name is Coleman Perret. I'm a Magic grinder. Trying to make the Pro Tour. I live in Louisiana, and I've been playing Magic since I was 12. And I'm very excited for the RC in DC as a Phoenix grinder aficionado. I've written a lot of content on Phoenix, and obviously they banned the top two decks that aren't Phoenix and left Treasure Cruise untouched. So I'm very excited about the format, and I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say too. So let's just go around. We'll go Reed, Shail, Peter. I'm fucking blanking right now. I'm sorry. We'll do that order, and then so just give me a quick blurb introduction, and then we'll move on from there.
I'm Reed Alexander. I'm a Magic player from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Played in a couple Pro Tours. Been in every RC so far. Finally school. Kind of excited. We'll see how it goes.
I'm Shail. My name's Shail. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and while I don't grind as much as I used to, I have played a lot of Phoenix over the last 3-ish years since returning to Magic.
I'm Parker Goff from Ridgeland, Mississippi. Big time Magic grinder, whether it be Standard, Pioneer, Modern. Been playing Sacrifice for quite a while, and with the new addition of the Big Cat, I'm super excited about the DC tournament.
My name is Peter Holman. I currently live in San Antonio, Texas, but I am originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Big non-rotating format player, love Legacy and Modern, and also play Pioneer. My deck got banned, so still figuring out what we're going to play.
Thank you for your introduction, Parker. Sorry I blanked on your freaking name. I apologize. But so the first question I want to go around the roundtable and ask is, if the tournament was tomorrow, which you don't have to give me an exact 75, but what archetype would you register, and what would be your second, and a very brief explanation of why. I'll go first. If I was playing tomorrow, I'd just register Phoenix. I've put a ton of work into the deck, and it's very well positioned. I'm very confident in all the matchups. I have pretty good plans for all my sideboard plans, which you can read about on the Patreon or in the Discord, some storms. But my second choice would be the Rakdos version of the Yagras Sack deck. I think it's very well positioned as well. You're one of the few decks that has a decent matchup into Phoenix. Not amazing, but closer to 50-50, and you're also just a very powerful engine. And we'll just keep that same order that we started with. So, Reed, you can go second.
Wait, what was your second deck? Sorry, I'm taking this.
My second deck was Rakdos Sack.
My top deck right now is Mono Green. Despite its I wouldn't say bad results online, but it just hasn't been being played. They hear me? Is it good? I think you're. Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. You're camera friendly, I think, so I was confused. I played a lot of Mono Green about a year ago whenever I qualified for PT's Barcelona. It was Mono Green last time I was good. I was playing a lot of Moya, but I got banned, so kind of moving around, but I'm used to the Mono Green lines, not really used to sideboarding, because we didn't have to do that a lot back in the day. Working on that, but that's the deck I've been playing the most. The next decks I'd probably consider are the Sack deck. Probably I played a lot of Sack a couple years ago when Pioneer, the RCQs first started around RC, the first Atlanta RC. I played a bit of Sack, but it's been a minute. I need to kind of get my reps in again. And then the various green white company creature decks, Angels, I think is kind of good. So that's kind of up there for me too.
For me, the answer is definitely Phoenix as the first. I would definitely lock in Steam Vents whenever it's playable. So the best Steam Vents deck is definitely Birds. And if I couldn't play Birds, I would either play Red Green, Red Black, or Red White with Red Leyline and Heartfire Hero in my deck. Or Heart Flame Hero, whatever that Valiant creature is from the new set.
I'm definitely, if I had to choose, it would be Jun Sack, just because I have a lot of reps with it, and as far as like my second choice, it would probably be Azorius Control, because I've played various control decks over the course of the last several months, and they're just the two most played decks under my belt, so comfort over betterness, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in playing decks that you're comfortable with is much more important than playing the absolute top tier deck. For me, the deck that I had the second most experience with was Greasefang, which got soft banned when Amalia was printed. But now I think Esper Greasefang's somewhat reasonable fringe deck that you can play. It's much better into Phoenix than Abzan Greasefang, so I'd probably register some variation of that. Also, you get to play Temporary Lockdown in the main deck, which is really good versus all of the Rakdos sack decks. My second deck would probably be Gruul Aggro. I think it's pretty bad into all of the Fatal Push decks, but it's pretty reasonable into Phoenix. I think it's probably like pretty close to 50-50. Because it's kind of like this weird back and forth game where you can play where if you ever get to blow out their removal spell with a pump spell like Monstrous Rage or the Atarka's Command, then you kind of just win the game on the spot. But obviously it's hard to get to that situation, but sometimes you can do that.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So just to recap real quick, we got first choice Phoenix, Reed had Mono Green, Shail had Phoenix, Parker said Sack, and Peter said Esper Greasefang, which is a very interesting choice, especially given the fact that the Absent decks have been doing pretty well lately. So I went and looked at the MTG Goldfish for the last 14 days, so 2 weeks, metagame for Pioneer. You got about 17% Phoenix, 9% Sack, 8% Rakdos Aggro, and that's kind of an amalgamation of these Callous Sellsword decks as well as the Tree of Perdition deck. The Tree of Perdition deck, I think, is remarkably worse in open deck list, as you know, you're not just going to get to cheese people. I feel like a lot of their wins come from these closed deck lists. Like they just go like Blood Tithe and a Fable, and then you're like, okay, I'm playing against Rakdos, and you do your turn, and then tap out, and now they go, okay, discard my tree, play it, Soul Cauldron, kill you. Blue White with 5%, the Green White Angels deck about 6%, 5%. And then, a smattering of different aggro decks. You got Rakdos mid-range at 5%, Abzan at 4%. Mono Green, like Reed said, has had a really strangely low percentage of play online, at least. They're only sitting at about 4%. You got Lotus Field at 2.5%. So, you're getting to kind of the doldrums of the metagame. You got some 5-color decks down there as well, right? But, as far as I can tell, the pillars of the format seem to be Is It Phoenix, the Sack deck, and to an extent Control. But really, it's kind of like a 2-deck metagame at the top with like a bunch of tier 2 options below them that have different strengths against each other and are kind of competing for some sort of a role. So let's just kind of like go around and if you want to just say something about the metagame, feel free to use this platform to give me your opinion on why you think these things are showing up like this, or what you think will transpire in the next few weeks leading up to the RC.
I'm gonna pull it up here just to take a look also.
Yeah, and that was the last 14 days.
I mostly been thinking about it purely from Mono Green perspective because I was pretty hyped to play it after Armani got banned because that was basically the only reason it wasn't playable before. But now a side effect of the Armani ban is a lot of the aggro decks are playable again, which is not exactly great for Mono Green. Better than Amalia, but not the best. The ones without slick shot show offs are specifically much better for mono green. So like the green red ones are a lot easier to deal with than like the red black ones, which are kind of becoming more popular.
You're talking like the green red plot deck, basically.
Yeah, like the plot version. I haven't. Maybe it's like a 50-50. To be honest, I haven't paid like a ton of attention before the ban. I'm paying a lot of attention after, but so some of the context of the format before the ban of how it developed, I don't really have, because I kind of was chilling out for a while. But I think it's still shaking out, so I'm kind of that's why I'm still open on like deck choice. Whereas like I'm like the most comfortable with mono green for sure. I think its position is pretty good. I like don't really hate my matchup into anything except the red black aggro deck, pretty much. Like I would be pretty okay playing against basically everything else. Especially once I like have more reps and become more comfortable. Like I can already kind of see that forming. But I've like watched some gameplay versus the red black deck some, and it does seem good. It does seem fine. It depends on what kind of build for mono green specifically. If you have like tail swipes in your sideboard, you're definitely a little bit better against the red black deck. They don't have anything like blossoming defense to blow that out. So that does help, but I'm not really sure where the sideboard is the most foreign concept to me for this deck because it just wasn't a factor before. So it's like completely new. I don't really think anyone knows what they're doing with it, to be honest. They're really all over the place. It's like the highest variation thing, part of the deck by like a lot, is the sideboard. So I think a lot of people are still kind of figuring out. And the format itself is just still shaking, so it's like, we're going to see how it goes. Like Google has been going up and up and up in play rate, and that's like, that would just destroy the aggro decks if that becomes like even more played than it is now.
Do you have any prediction for the metagame for the RC?
I think Pyroclasm, as most people predict, is going to shut out Convoke completely, so it's kind of just off my radar, like on preparing against it. Even though I don't really think the Convoke matchup for Green was really that bad a year ago. It wasn't really, I think it was good, actually. I think the Jund, so there's a lot of new decks, and they're going to get more tuned to get better, like the Jund deck, for example. But there can be a lot of adjustments, like the temporary lockdown thing that Peter mentioned. That's a huge adjustment. A lot of decks can play or can make blue-eye control. If that becomes good again, especially, I don't really know what the average Phoenix deck is doing as far as playing Temporal Trespass. I know that was like one of the ways they usually were able to beat blue-white. So I don't know how that is going to position against Phoenix, how commonly that combo is played. But if it's not played, I assume it's probably going to be pretty good against Phoenix, or decent at least. And if they can figure out how to handle the red-black decks, like the aggro decks, then I think blue-white could be pretty good, especially if lockdown is strong against the sack deck specifically. And it's going to be good against the aggro deck too. So that could that kills two of the pillars to me. So maybe blue-white gets up there. There's still a lot of shaking about to do. Basically, I'm kind of holding off on any broad, any bold predictions about the metagame, pretty much.
Just to touch on one thing that you mentioned. Just to touch on one thing that you said, I agree. As a Phoenix player, I'm much less worried about the black-red versions of these aggro decks than I am of the green-red or white-red versions, because the green and white versions have protection spells. So, Claim to Fame is good, but if I can spend all my mana every turn killing your stuff, at least I know that I'm not going to get blown out by one of these protection spells. So it's probably why Peter mentioned the green-red version as that he liked that version better because it has those protection spells. But
yeah, I think the average card quality in green red is pretty bad, but they do have the protection spells, which are really strong. So it's kind of hard to say. I haven't seen anyone play this matchup at all, but just from looking on the outside, it seems like Phoenix would just absolutely dominate those kind of decks.
Yeah,
so I don't.
Success,
it's like deemed like
dive soon.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll touch on that later, I guess. That part just kind of confuses me as to why they're doing so well, even though it seemed like Phoenix would. But
I played a couple matches against the red-black deck, but not enough to tell you with certainty that Phoenix is massively favored. So we're going to practice that matchup soon within the next week or so. I'll probably drop a video with 10 or 15 games on it.
Gotcha.
At that point, I'll be able to speak to that more. But why don't we move to Shail? Shail, you got anything about the metagame? Any predictions? Any insights for us?
I think mono green in this current metagame is like very underrepresented. Definitely think I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know if people just aren't playing it or if the sideboard problem that we just talked about isn't like fixed and they can't figure out how to not get run over by red black and green red aggro. But I think Nykthos should be a much bigger portion of the metagame.
Yeah,
That's my only major like add to like I think maybe I don't know what one of these decks is like smaller, but I think some portion of this metagame should involve like 8% of green.
Right, 3% is very low.
Quick interjection on that point. If you look at a lot of the challenge, like a lot of the good result decks for mono green the last weekend, a lot of them are like the Josh Holtzman list that has been playing way more 3-drops, or not way more, but like a couple extra, like Pelucrinoses, which are particularly very, very good against aggro. Because you can make a lot of early plays by turn 4 where you just go, you can have a Pelucrinos in play early, and then flip it on like turn 4, attack and untap it with Kiora, and then they basically can't win.
Yeah, I mean, Polyk has a lot of value in speed.
That was like a very, very common way to beat that. And yeah, they're playing a couple more of those, making the curve a bit lower, and going to the, they're doing that by going to, they got the Othanissa, the one of Othanissa that a lot of people play, which doesn't really make sense. I never like that. But they're also cutting one of the Wolvenwald oddities and playing the hostile land to like have some, it's like a safety valve for the combo.
That gets it back from the graveyard,
so you can,
in case you mill it.
Yeah, you like it's a weird card, but it lets you sack a Cavalier to get it back.
Yeah.
And then you play another guy to draw a card, and you put it. It's in case you mill it with a or just get killed. Which,
Right.
if it gets killed that turn, it's going to get killed being in combat. So like you're not going to kill him that turn unless you have a big lair that's not summoning sick. But you usually have a big board with like a flip Pelucrinose or something, and you should be okay.
Yeah. Parker,
I mean, as long as you're like a farewell deck or something.
I mean, I can really only speak from like the sacrifice deck's perspective and control's perspective.
Well, maybe
but
before you go on, maybe just talk about like how you're testing what the sack deck has been, and if there's any weaknesses in the metagame for it, or anything you've really been dominating. Yeah, it's good that you have the sack perspective. Like, let's hear from that.
Well, something that I've noticed a lot is that the mirror match in the Recto Sacrifice is just egregious. It's almost coin flippy at times. I had one game where I sadly learned the interaction between my Yigra and my opponent's Culture Familiars.
Yeah.
He got me with.
People got all their Jaegers.
Yeah, he double blooded butt token me and pitched 2 Culture Familiars and then comboed me with my own Yigra. And it was kind of eye-opening why people are playing they're like dedicating so many sideboard slots to like Leyline of the Void and like these graveyard hate things that are like kind of difficult to deal with for the like Jund sack list. People were playing like Haywire Might, which I think is probably the best option, and Feed the Swarm as like ways to remove it. Obviously, Feed the Swarm's a little bit easier to cast, and the life loss isn't super relevant unless you're playing against like an aggro deck, which the aggro decks in the format are so potent that I personally have had a hard time dealing with like most of them, but
Just like one
that might
drop,
just
2-drop, pump spell is good enough.
yeah. Mainly just like Monstrous Rage is just a fucking killer, dude.
Yeah,
It's
crazy.
insane.
Mayhem Devil's not enough to beat down a bunch of 1/1s?
Well, when you play Mayhem Devil on turn 3 and you're dead before then, like it becomes difficult.
Missing out on
If
playing
you go oven into cat or whatever, play a Mayhem Devil on turn 3, you usually win. But if you don't do that,
Yeah.
The aggro decks can run you over. Especially like the thing is like we got to remember that for the RC it's open deck list, so like you're gonna know what your opponent's doing. So like people talk about the difference between closed deck lists and open deck lists. I'm not sure they really understand the fundamental differences that it has. Basically, if you're on a super linear deck, like a super aggro or combo, you're going to have a harder time in open deck list because your opponent is not going to keep hands that are bad against you unless they're just making bad mulligan decisions. But they're going to have enough information to say, okay, well, I have to mulligan to a couple of removal spells, right? Or one removal spell and something to blocker or something. They're not going to keep 3-drop, 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 4 lands.
The one thing that it actually does very powerfully for those decks, though, Coleman, if you want to talk about the linear combo decks, is knowing what kind of sideboard hate you have to fight through is such a enormous advantage. Just hey, do I have to deal with Leyline? Because not everyone's going to run Leyline in their sideboard, right? But is this black deck running it or not? It's just that level is the counterpoint to what you're saying. But I do think in general, it benefits reactive decks, very least game one.
Yeah, game one, and then it probably helps the proactive decks a little bit more in post board. But the thing is, all that means is that both players have more information to work with, right? So I don't know, you're gonna also as the deck bringing in the graveyard hate or whatever, you're also gonna understand which pieces of interaction that the proactive deck has for those pieces of hate because you get to see the list. So I think that kind of is a kind of a wash. Whereas the funny wins that hyper aggro and linear combo decks get in game one from just oh, okay, my opponent kept a slow hand, now they're just dead. I feel like you win a lot less game ones in open deck list with these linear strategies.
I've discussed it a bit with open deck lists, and I'm pretty sure it's just pretty much a wash all around, outside of some maybe crazy niche scenarios. I do like the scenario that you said about the tree deck getting a lot worse in open deck lists, which I think is true. That's one of the very, very few scenarios I think it doesn't really have an effect on it shouldn't. It should have an effect on your gameplay, not on any outside of the game decision making. I don't think. I don't think it should influence you in a way that'll make you play a weird sideboard card so your opponent plays around it, or think a deck is better in open deck list than another deck. Outside of some, like I said, the tree, for example, the tree deck is a very weird one that almost plays in a way that feigns like it's another deck.
Right.
I will say on it.
Yeah, that was a very unique scenario. Most of the time, though, a lot of people talk about blue-white control better in open deck lists because it's so reactive. It's I don't think so.
I don't know about that.
The red-black decks are just going to mulligan their double fatal push openers, and it's going to be way better.
I do think mid-range decks largely get better in open deck list because you have the whole if I draw the wrong half of my deck conundrum. Well, now I know that I can't draw this half of the deck.
The decks that for sure get better are those with companions because you no longer have the disadvantage of a game one companion.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, that is 100% true. Pete, you got anything largely to say about the format or what you think might happen going forward before the RC, etc.?
Yeah, so here's the thing about Magic players. They absolutely love blue-reds take game actions decks. And that's what Phoenix is. Those decks are always going to be overrepresented whether or not they are viable or not. You see it with Murktide in Modern, which sat at a cool 43% win rate for 2 years and was still the most represented deck in the format. And Phoenix is actually good, which means you're just going to see even more of them. So I think basically if you're going into the format, you're hey, I need to beat Phoenix. You need to be able to play Phoenix or beat Phoenix, and those are the two options. So I think on that note, the kind of underrepresented decks that I think you might see rise up and have a larger sample size at the RC are Angels. It beats up on aggro. Look, you're conceding to Supreme Verdict, and that's fine. But you're probably good versus the rest of the metagame. And maybe not Mono Green. Maybe Mono Green's fine into you. And then also Hidden Strings. I think Hidden Strings is pretty solid versus Phoenix in general. And the deck is a little bit more finicky, and it obviously loses some value in open deck lists because, like you said, you're not going to keep creature removal in your hand game one. But I do think that's going to see. I would expect both of those decks to put someone into the top 8 of the RC. Angels and Lotus Field.
The Angels call for the top 8 is wild. I think Lotus Field's pretty likely. I do think Lotus Field, especially, I don't know if you guys have seen the new lists, but they're playing a Visa main deck to try and help combat the aggro decks because they can Arch Druid's Charm for it. Yeah, I think Lotus Field's quite good, and you're right. Like if the player base's consensus is that Phoenix is the best deck and the deck to beat, what decks do we play? We play Angels and Lotus Field, right? I like that. I like that sort of sentiment. Not as a Phoenix player, but as a viewer of the metagame, I think that's a pretty smart way to think about it.
On another note, like kind of getting off the top of how it is right now, but looking at the spoilers from the new set, I think that one card in particular is going to be very played, and it's this Untimely Malfunction. It kind of gives these red decks another out. I almost feel like it could be main deckable in some ways. It's one of these hyper aggro decks. Being able to pseudo counter removal spells by changing the target of something to put it on your smaller dude or your thing that doesn't do as much damage, but also just not letting 2 of their dudes block to push through damage is kind of cool. Also, having the artifact restriction is just a plus, I guess. But I think it's a really good set of
modal cards. When the card does this many different things, man, who knows how good this thing is? It's also 2 mana, so who knows, right? Well, I think we'll have to break this card down and put it in some decks and play test with it to really understand how it's affecting the format. Yeah, there's a bunch of new cards that are really interesting. There's we can get into that in a second.
Yeah.
Does anybody have, kind of on the same line, but does anybody have specific cards they've been testing for the RC, for their archetype that they've been working on that they really like, that they think is going to be a good choice for the tournament? Myself, if you're part of the Discord or the Patreon, then you'll know I've been, absolutely hyping up this 3 steps ahead Fable of the Mirror Breaker sideboard plan. I think it's just a really, really good way to combat the graveyard hate. I think Fable, if Cruz and Fable are the best cards in the format, let's play both of them. And 3 steps ahead gives you stack interaction as well as, it's very versatile, it's very modal, right? It's one of those cards like that red card where on the surface it looks clunky, but it just gives you so many options that it's been really good for me. Why don't we go around?
What cards?
3 steps ahead with Fable as sort of a sideboard pivot away from the graveyard instead of playing Crackling Drakes and.
I thought you meant specifically new cards.
I just mean for the RC, if there's anything that you really think is good that people aren't playing.
The list that popped up this week can have it, but I really like Scrap Shooter a ton in the Monogreen deck. I'll talk to you about it a bit, but they.
I'm sorry, can you just? What does the card do?
It is a 1 GG 3 mana 4/4 with reach in Boom Barrel. It has gift a card, and when it enters, if the gift was promised, you naturalize. You destroy an artifact or enchantment. So it's a 3 mana 4/4 with reach at base. This is kind of big because it's a naturalize effect guy that triggers Kiora and Outcast or Trailblazer, and having reach is a huge bonus. The gift a card is way not as big of a deal when you're drawing a card too. So also it's just normal card in your deck. It's very, very rarely worse than Polukranos, just normally. I think you could main deck it over that, but I think Polukranos is better against the aggro decks, so it's probably a little safer to play that in the main deck. But you can bring it in for Phoenix if you just want extra reach guys and you want to lower your curve and you just want more things to draw card with your 4/2 and your Cura. If you can bring it in against decks that are bringing in Damping Spear. There's Leyline Binding decks. I've seen a lot of Incarnation popping up recently for some reason. That's been pretty good there. He's been good. Biggest downside of that guy is he cannot naturalize if you hit him up Storm, which is a little annoying, but we weren't really playing a guy before that did that anyway, besides maybe Haywire Might if you count that, but this guy's a lot more modular than that card. The other one, I guess, was Keen-Eyed Curator. over unlicensed Hearst, so far I have liked a lot. It kind of dies if Fire Impulse against Phoenix, but like you can probably get some value when you play it. Still, it shouldn't matter too much if you can eat like off Phoenix. This is I'll explain this part too. This is the GG 2-mana 3/3. 1 mana, exile a card from a graveyard, any one generic mana. And then if it has 4 more card types exiled with it, it gets +4/+4 and trample. It goes 7/7 with trample, which I have not done. But it's like a little scavenging use the eye that is 2 green pips, which is kind of sweet. I like it a little more than Hearst because it just gets on board better. I've too many times against decks like Sack, especially. I'll like play the Hearst, and they'll just like put a mana double and play, and I'll die. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And,
Play 2 Fables and you lose.
it's like I think it's a little worse against. I know, yeah, but this guy, he's like a 3/3 that actually is on board, which is a lot better, and just ramps your game plan, being to a GV 2-drop, which is kind of nice. It's a little worse against Phoenix because it just dies to all their rule spells, but I think it can get some value usually, and it's like been good enough.
Have you
fine
played
there.
against Fang?
I haven't played. Oh, I have. Yeah, I did play it once against Fang. It was pretty good. They can't really kill it. At least I don't think the most lists have a lot of removal spells for it. Also, notably, an even cost card for some matchups like Sack playing Extinction Events potentially, or various other decks like that. Which is kind of nice when I can randomly throw even cost creatures in my deck. It's kind of nice.
I can't say that I've ever heard of Rakdos Sack playing Extinction Event, but interesting.
It's an option available. I know it kills mana double against green, but it's around, I guess. I like probably if I wanted to cut like a lot of like bad cards like elves, I could probably bring some of these in against mid range potentially. If I just wanted like a dude that does something. But anytime I can throw an even cost card in my deck, kind of nice. Otherwise, I think that's it. Yeah.
Shail, you got anything? Any
What's that?
interesting cards that you
Red
think?
Leyline. I want to know what your thoughts are on Red Leyline.
Yeah, I agree. I think once again with the cards that are not real yet, right? They haven't been printed yet. We don't have them. If the red leyline decks are consistent enough that they can go 1-drop, pump spell thud on 2 and can just kill you, obviously that's broken. We don't know yet.
But even when you go do that, the decks like play all of these cards already, right? Like it's not like you were like, oh, Monstrous Rage is such a bad card, I didn't want to put it in my deck. It was already in your deck, and you're just like adding this red leyline
And it makes
to your
Ancestral
deck.
Anger quite good, and Defiant Strike, and probably the heroic deck when they have the leyline draw, they'll just kill you on 2 or 3, and you're going to be really mad. But the flip side of it is that they're putting 4 red leylines in their deck. So let's say they don't start with it in play, and then on turn 3 they draw a leyline, and then on turn 5 they draw a leyline. Right? They're probably not winning that game, right? So I think it's a dual-sided coin. You're basically raising the ceiling of the deck, you're raising the explosivity of the deck, but you're also lowering the floor of the deck. You're making your mid-game draws even worse somehow. What are you cutting for this out of the red-white deck? Probably the 4-mana thing that exiles the top 4, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a strict downgrade.
Oh, it's a strict downgrade when you draw it on turn 4, but it's obviously way better to start with it in your opening hand. So like I said, you're making your deck slightly less inconsistent, but the trade-off is that you're making it 2 or 3 or 4 times as powerful in the early turn. So
you gotta find the average. You gotta find the average, how good is the average version of that deck versus the average version of the other deck, which is kind of hard to figure out. I'd be kind of tough to figure out in RC.
To that point, how does green feel with the leyline?
Oh, the new leyline?
The forward green one?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're playing it.
Like Leyline the Guild deck? Yeah, that's great.
But you still draw it at some points though, and it doesn't feel that bad.
You just cast it.
Yeah,
When you're going off,
It's different because it's a red deck, and it's like a devotion style deck.
yeah. The difference is
This is part of the combo turns too. If I'm tapping Nykthos 2 more times a turn, if I play it, it's just nets for me.
Also, mono green draws a bunch of cards where
So,
mono red deck, unless you're playing a bunch of Ancestral Angers and Defiant Strikes, you're not cycling through your deck a lot. You don't have a lot of 2-for-1s, right?
Yeah, I guess fair enough. Might be way overhyped on this card.
It kind of goes even on itself. The closest comparison, this is a weird comparison, but since I've been playing more, I've kind of realized the Leyline the Guild Pact is it's basically just a better version of Wolfwell Haven, which is a weird thing to compare it to, but it kind of functions the same roll, where it's like unkillable ramp. It's kind of weird, but it kind of functions that way. It's kind of nice. There's a card that does that I like too, but I'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Anything besides red ley line? Shail?
Say again?
Anything besides red ley line that you're kind of hyped on for the RC?
No new cards that I expect. I think most everything has already been found.
Yeah. Parker?
New cards.
Ygra?
Yeah, Ygra. I mean, we're yeah, it's really just Ygra. Everything else is just kind of like figured out.
Are you playing 2 or 3?
I haven't decided yet. I think so. The issue I have with 2 Ygras is the games that I've tested with it. It's like I never find it, and whenever I run 3,
Draw it real bad.
yeah, it's like, well, I never really want to draw it. Like, there's a lot more games that I want to mill it versus draw it.
And then my other question is, some of the lists are playing 3 or 4 talents. Like some people are trimming the 4th talent. What do you think about that?
I think it is correct to be on 3 talents. I don't want to really see that card in multiples.
It's funny. So as a Phoenix player, like one of the ways that Phoenix is losing in the matchup, we tested this matchup a bunch. One of the ways that Phoenix loses is if the sack deck just plays 2 talents and levels them both up. Because then now, like, they can get themselves to a board state where they can mill you for like 30 or something, right? And you can't really interact with that because like the Phoenix player has to mill their deck to play the game.
It's the issue I have is like the deck is so tight. It's hard to make cuts. So it's like so like the things I've seen people like cut and trim is like you have the talent, you have a land slot, which people are going between 22 and 23 lands. You have that 5th 1-drop slot.
Yeah,
and like 1-drop. Yeah, like Unliquid Witness. Some people have played like Shambling Gas. Which that one has some really cool like turn 3 Ygra plays, but I don't think it's that great.
Yeah, it looks like most of the lists have moved over to claim the firstborn for those slots.
Yeah.
For the 1-drop slots.
I think having access to claim the firstborn in your deck is kind of necessary in the format at the moment. There's just a lot of like really aggro decks that you get a lot of value out of having that in your deck.
Gotcha.
I think it's Phoenix taking Shredder's gotta be sweet.
Oh yeah, dude, taking it and then going like push or oven connive, whatever. Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, Peter, you got anything spicy?
I don't know if it's spicy or is new, but I think right now, if I was playing white, which I'm probably going to be playing, is I would recommend Deafening Silence for the sideboard.
Yeah.
It's really good versus Phoenix, and it's really good versus some decks that like Lotus Field that you would pick to beat Phoenix. So I think it's just like a really high value sideboard card right now.
Yeah, I mean the Angels players are playing a couple. I think they're playing a couple of those and a couple of Rest in Peace. So, that matchup is tough. Always has been in X4s, right? But, yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. You guys have anything else you'd really like to discuss before we get off? Like I said, I want to do another one of these before the RC, but just wanted to kind of pick your brains for a little bit about the format. See if there was anything low-hanging fruit that I missed. If you want to eat some apples real quick, now's the time. If anybody wants to take the floor, they can discuss whatever they'd like to.
Have you ever had a chance to iterate your argument on why Crackling Drake is a bad card?
I mean, I've done it in multiple videos, but and here's the thing: I don't think Crackling Drake is a bad card. It's just that whenever you cast it, so like, okay, let me put it this way. You can't bring it in the mirror because of Mystical Dispute and Running Volley and Axe, right? And the other blue decks also have Mystical Dispute, so it's not really amazing against control. It's pretty good against mid-range, right? Like the mid-range decks. But it still does to push, right? And like you play it, you draw a card. If they don't kill it, it'll kill them, hopefully, right? But like in low resource games, like let's say they have a Leyline of the Void, like okay, now I have Crackling Drake in my deck, like that's how I'm gonna beat them, right? I'm gonna win with this Crackling Drake, right? Well, like I said, it loses to a single push or one rule spell. It's just kind of like you're kind of like Hail Marying when you cast it. You're like, okay, let me play it, and like, okay, if it lives, I win. Whereas like Fable, makes the 2/2, right? Fable's one of the best cards in the format, and the reason why is because if they have a Leyline in play, I can discard my Treasure Cruise that is stuck in my hand to draw another card and continue playing the game normally, right? I don't have to like pray and slam this Crackling Drake and go, okay, hope I'm not dead, hope that they don't kill it, right? I can just play my Fable on turn 3. Very very likely they're not killing me on 4, so I'm safe to tap out for it. Now, if I have dead cards in my hand from the Graveyard Disruption, I can discard them and draw new ones. If they don't have the Leyline in play, then I can just discard other stuff and it fuels my Treasure Cruise, right? It's also incredibly good with Proselytic Memory because you can curve into it and then you make the token and then you untap, you loot 2, and then you can put 2 counters on your token. So and it makes 2 bodies for the profs. Basically, I just think it's better in the mirror, it's better against control, it's better against mid range. I like 3 steps ahead a lot. It's very good with that card. If you're allowed to play Fable in your format, there's like a pretty good argument for casting the card. So you gotta cut something from your deck. I will say Fable and Crackling Drake are also quite good together, right? Because going like Crackling Drake, copy it, attack with the copy is good. But really, the sideboard slots are tight. I don't want it in the mirror, but I want something that's good in the mirror. And you can only play 15 sideboard cards, so you got to figure out which ones you want to play. I don't fault people for playing Crackling Drake. I'm just not going to register it in DC.
I wanted to get that clip. Sorry.
You can send that to somebody.
Well, you get asked it so many times, like in your Discord, in the ArcLink Discord, and all of these other places. I just want to be able to link it rather than having you type that out. Because I think you've typed that out like 50 times.
Probably. I mean, the real explanation is like, look, all the cards are pretty good. You can play Crackling Drake if you want to. It's a totally fine card. It does the thing. It does what it says on the card. It's good. I just don't think it's very well positioned. I think that people are playing it are like, I don't know. Maybe maybe that's what they want to do. They just want to play the card and pray. But I'd rather just play Fable and grind a little bit. You don't insta win if you untap with it, but the chances of you winning when you untap with a Fable are pretty high, right? And it's way harder to kill than a Crackling Drake is.
And one more question: did you want to talk about 10 cantrips versus 12?
I mean, look, I've played 10, 11, 12. We used to play 8, right? So I think that the number of cantrips in your deck, the more cantrips, the better game 1, right? I think that's probably true. But the trade-off is that you have less slots in your deck for actual cards, right? So you're Xerox, right? You're already a Xerox deck. Now I have 12 cantrips instead of 10. So you kind of get diminishing returns on your Xerox spells, right? And also, I wanted these slots for these, extra Brazen Borrowers, the 3 steps ahead, the 3rd profs, Eidetic Memory. So you got to find the slots somewhere, right? And post-board, they're actually, usually, I'm cutting the 2 sleight of hands that are left in the deck a lot, post-board, bringing a 20th land in, right? So I'm going to 8 cantrips, and sleight of hand is just the worst cantrip in the deck, right? In a vacuum, it's probably the best or slightly worse than consider, but it's definitely better than opt in a vacuum. But the fact that it's sorcery speed and it doesn't actually draw a card for Proselytic Memory means that it's the worst cantrip for the deck specifically. And post-board, you're often trying to play at instant speed, and tapping 1 mana on your turn for a sleight of hand to try and find a land is actually more costly than you might imagine post-board. So 10 versus 12. If you told me that 5 years from now I'll look back on this and call myself stupid for not playing 12, I maybe you're right. But I've played a lot of games with this deck, and I think that 10 is good enough for the deck to function smoothly. And I want to play the other cards, right? I don't see obviously where I can cut 2 cards You could cut the 3 steps that's main deck and the second borrower and play 12 cantrip, but like, is that really better? Like at some point you're just going to cantrip into more cantrips, and you're going to wish that you had some more action.
It does mean that you have to be more conservative with your lines when you cast your cantrips, because you might not have a cantrip to always trigger a shredder.
Right. Like sometimes I won't cantrip on one if I have, let's say my hand is like 3 lands, 1 cantrip, shredder, cruise, right? Maybe I don't cast my cantrip on turn 1. Maybe I just go tap land, go shredder, turn 3 play shredder cantrip, right? To guarantee that I have the cantrip, especially if you already have your lands. Basically early game, you're using your cantrip to find your lands, and then later in the game, you're using them to either find action or trigger your stuff, right? I guess you're right in a way. The cantrips are more valuable in a 10 cantrip list, whereas in a 12 cantrip list, they're more expendable in that you're very likely to find another one. Although here's the thing, like with 10 cantrips in your deck, like you're pretty likely to find another one, right? It's not like you have 0 or 5 or 4. You still have 10. You have 10. You're losing. What's that? 2 12ths, right?
Yeah, but that's percentage points.
18% or something, right? So you still have
to add on to your point, Coleman. I think this is something we could look at other formats for. Whereas Phoenix is obviously the only high cantrip deck, but in Legacy, you see many 8 to 12 cantrip decks all the time. Obviously, those are hilariously better cantrips.
Right.
But at the same time, the conventional wisdom that you will get from anyone who knows what they're talking about in Legacy is that you don't cast your cantrips unless you need something.
Right.
Right, exactly. You don't, and I'm sure Coleman has told people who are consuming his content that, but just to reiterate, you don't cast your cantrips if you don't know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you're just casting them to cast, which occasionally you can do if you want to like fill for a treasure cruise or something. But I definitely don't think it's like, 10 cantrips is too low. I don't have a ton of Phoenix experience at all, but in general, you do want to use your cantrips for a purpose, and 10 versus 12 in that instance doesn't really have that big of an impact as long as you're using them correctly.
Well, yeah, like I said, guys, thank you all so much for your time. Does anybody have anything else they'd really like to get off their chest before we break apart?
So I'll make me too.
Real quick, I had a thing. The cards I liked in the new set specifically were the duels.
Oh yeah, the Verges.
The Verges?
Yeah. The Verges are sick.
Yeah, those so the duel basically they're really niche. I don't think we're gonna see that much Pioneer play, but if you've ever, a lot of people have probably experienced this in Pioneer at some point with some deck they played with pathways. If you've ever played a deck where you are 90% of the time putting a pathway on one side specifically, this land is going to be better if the front side of the land is the one you want. There have been mono green. I've mostly analyzed it in perspective of mono green, but there's other stuff too. Like there has been mono green lists that have like splashed a lot of white, not just like a 1 Elfstorm they're randomly casting off the Liberators or the Leyline. And they play like branched off pathway. The green white one is just a better force if you do not care about the type. It just enters untapped always and taps are green. So like it is always going to be better. And it just lets you play white cards like Hellstorm for free if you want, pretty much. It makes it so much more consistent. I think in the sack deck, depending on what your mana base looks like, I think the red-green one might be good too. Because that's just a mono-red land that is cast Yigger, which is kind of nice, it seems like. Like, you don't want to play red-green pathway. Like, making a mono-red land seems very bad in the sack deck. But a random red-green land that always makes red when you want it to, is on tap always, that seems pretty good. Whereas, like, the black-red one, I don't think is going to be better than the pathway. Because you're just not always going to have a swamp or a mountain, and you just want it to do what you want. You're using both of them probably an equal amount of time, or close to that, like 60-40 maybe, favoring black probably. But the blue-white one also, there's been a mono-white humans deck that's splashing like Reflector Mage and Mockingbird. the blue white lands is a slam dunk in that deck. It's just like 9 plus. That card is just nasty for that mana base. It's clearly just really good. Because like, same thing. That deck would not want a mono blue land to play with a pathway, but this land is just clearly like going to be quite good in that deck if that deck is good.
Yeah, and you have a bunch of planes in the deck, so
Yeah,
like
and
you can automatically. I like the fact that these lands turn on whether it is like one or the other. Like is
yeah.
in
I
previous.
don't like the green white when it elves either, because it will always cast an elf on turn 1 and tap for white. Probably tap for double white on turn 3.
Right.
Which is kind of nice. Too. That's like a really good one too for angels. Potentially, I like that. They also don't like the pathways that much because they don't want a mono green land because they're so heavy white. They have a white 2-drop, I think, right?
Yeah, when they
Like the 1/4. Like going pathway on green into elf is like, it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, and so like this land is just like if you go that into a plains or whatever, like Temple Garden. I don't know how many typed lands they normally play, but plains or Temple Garden, you just can cast the bishop or whatever. You can cast Resplendent Angel on turn 2 with an elf, which is kind of rare. It just helps them do that a lot more with the elves. So I think these lands are kind of cool. I like them in mono green. I can probably play Elshorn really easily. I'm like literally cutting before these is like almost free for pretty much, unless you're playing a weird card like Castle Garen Brig or something.
Cool.
I think it's a little sketchier,
Bridges
but
are
otherwise,
good.
yeah, these lands are
Bridges are going to be good for sure. So we're getting ready at 9 o'clock. About an hour of content for the listeners. And like I said, if you guys are interested, we'll reconvene maybe about a week before the RC and have another discussion. But I just want to say thank you to all 4 of you for jumping on. Reed, Shail, Parker, and Peta. You guys instrumental parts of the community, and I will let you guys know if there's any feedback from the video, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thank you so much.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem.
Bye.